Hey everyone, Brian here, and I am back yet again with another episode of Nerd Theater. Now, today is a pretty interesting episode, to say the least, because I'm going to be talking about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And if you're aware of the history of my channel, or you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you're probably pretty aware of how heavily tied Sonic the Hedgehog is to B-Boy Studios. Going back to the very conception of this channel, I started off here making Sonic stop-motion videos, and then from there my friend Simon and I got together and started doing these Sonic and Tails Insane Adventures episodes, which ended up being a much bigger hit than I think either of us were anticipating, which to this day I still very much appreciate. I'm so grateful for the impact, the positive impact, and just the overall appreciation and enjoyment that those videos provided people. I'm still very happy and proud of that era of my YouTube channel. So thank you guys. I know people who watched those videos back in the day or recently discovered them are still around the channel to this day because I still get comments about the Sonic and Tails Insane Adventures series. And while it has come to an end, and I have moved my channel on into a different direction, I do still appreciate those early days. So you might be thinking, if you're watching this video, what are my current thoughts of the blue blur? Do I still like Sonic? Well, if you take a look around, the answer is pretty clear. The short answer is yes. I'm wearing this Sonic shirt that my girlfriend Alyssa got me. I got some games here, and I am currently playing Sonic and Shadow Generations. So I do keep up with the blue blur. I do still love Sonic. I would consider him my favorite game character of all time to this day. And while I don't like him quite nearly as much as I did back when I was younger, I do still have a fondness for the character himself. And I find this to be a really interesting opportunity to bring Sonic into my Nerd Theater reviews, a kind of a clashing of the eras of my channel, I guess you could say. And it was actually my girlfriend Alyssa's idea to review the Sonic movies. And that's right, I did say movies. I'm going to be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog 3 when it comes out later this December. But to roll back the clock a little bit to 2019, I remember when I first saw the Sonic movie trailer, and I was a little more than cautiously optimistic, is probably the nicest way to put it. I remember the biggest hurdle for me and so many other people was Sonic's actual character design. I just remember seeing that really ugly design paired with the Gangsta's Paradise music in the trailer, and I remember just being confused by the time it ended. I was like, okay, it's kind of cool we're finally seeing a live action slash CG animated Sonic movie, but not sure I'm going to be checking this one out. It left me a little bit lukewarm.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Now, the Sonic design, it's been talked about to death at this point. I really don't think there's anything I could add other than he looked bad. I mean, heck, he was even in the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie as a joke character. It's pretty well known that the general consensus of Sonic's original design for this movie were very, very negative, and it left a lot of people feeling a little more than skeptical about the overall movie. However, fans and people online alike just ended up coming together and just saying, wow, this design is really bad. Maybe pump the brakes on this one, make some tweaks. And tweaks were definitely made. It was a really interesting example of online criticism just having such a huge impact on a major motion picture like Sonic the Hedgehog. And while I do normally say it should be the artist's decision at the end of the day and they shouldn't let outside voices influence them, I think this is a rare case in which it was actually a good thing because I do personally believe I don't think this is an overstatement. I do believe that Sonic's redesign saved the movie in a lot of ways. However, even after the redesign, I was keeping up to date on some of the news for it, and I was like, okay, that's cool that they redesigned him. Jim Carrey's Dr. Eggman, that's interesting, I guess. Cool to see that he's getting on-screen representation, but I didn't actually watch the movie in theaters. I didn't see it for years. It came out in 2020 officially, and then the sequel followed the movie's success. They made Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and while I thought that was cool they were doing a sequel, I still didn't watch that one either. So years went by and I didn't watch either movie for one reason or the other. I don't know, it was just something about the trailers, something about just the overall, I don't know, feel of the movie. I don't even know if it was the movie's fault itself, so to speak. It just really didn't strike a chord for me, which is weird because, like I said, I still consider myself a Sonic fan. I just didn't really find much interest in the trailers or the movies themselves. However, after hearing many people talk about them and give them pretty high critical praise, a lot of my friends were talking about them too, saying that they enjoyed them. So I was like, okay, I'll give them a chance, you know? At the end of the day, they're an hour and a half each, just about. It's not that huge of a commitment. I went and I watched both of them actually pretty recently, just a little bit before recording this video. However, it wasn't until I caught wind of the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie that I really started to get interested in the series. Shadow the Hedgehog was going to be introduced. He's going to be voiced by Keanu Reeves. That was pretty cool. And just the overall look and what the production sounded like, it seemed a lot more like a Sonic game coming to life on the big screen. So I was like, okay, I guess I gotta watch these movies now. So diving right in, we were immediately greeted by a Marvel-style Sega movie intro, which I did kind of chuckle at a little bit. I found it to be a little corny because at this point, we've seen the Marvel intro copied by so many movie studios, so many movies, that it's just, I found it to be a little funny. It just really goes to show just how much of a long-lasting impact Marvel has had on the current direction of mainstream movies. I mean, even to this day, I do think the MCU probably had its peak in popularity right at Endgame and Infinity War. And even though it's kind of started to decline a little bit, it is still pretty interesting to see just the overall impact that we're still seeing in movies to this day. Also, it's worth noting that Sonic is voiced by Ben Schwartz, who you may know as Jean-Ralphio from Parks and Recreation. And Sonic's origin story is actually pretty similar to that of the games. At first, Sonic is a drifter. He has no real home. He has no real known origins. However, in this movie, they do give him somewhat of a guardian figure in an owl character named Longclaw. And also, Sonic's home is attacked by an echidna tribe, forcing him to take a portal ring to the real world, where he'll spend the rest of his formative years. Also, it is worth noting, I did watch this movie with my girlfriend Alyssa, and we both found Baby Sonic to be very cute. However, it does make one wonder what he could have looked like had the redesign not happened. But you may be asking, where did cute little Baby Sonic get sent to exactly? Well, he got sent to a small little town in Montana called Green Hills. Very cheeky. It's here where we meet our secondary main character, Thomas, a local police officer who's played by James Marsden, who's continuing his ongoing run of live-action cartoon movies, which, if you know anything about the residuals that actors get from every time a kid streams a movie or the DVD sales, is a really smart move on James Marsden's and his manager's part. And a nice little character moment we get really early on is Sonic going out of his way to save some small woodland creatures in the real world, which is very true to his character right off the bat from the first game. So by the time the 10-minute mark hits, Sonic's been living in the real world for quite a while at this point in the story. Heck, he's even got his own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles style lair. Meanwhile, Thomas and his wife Maddie discover that Tom has been offered a job at the San Francisco Police Department. It would be a big step up. He'd be able to help people more, and it would be a bigger role in a much bigger city in comparison to Green Hills, where he doesn't really see much action. And while that's going on, we have Sonic facing his fears of loneliness. While he is in the new world, while he's been here for a while, he's really different. He's a blue hedgehog, so he hasn't made very many friends over the years, and he fears that may be the case forever. He thinks that he's going to end his time here on Earth alone. And so, in an emotional act, he goes to a baseball diamond, runs around in circles really, really, really fast, activates his supersonic speed, and causes an EMP. It literally, for miles and miles, just shuts down. It has an entire blackout of the whole city and the surrounding areas. Sonic's one-man carousel also causes a lot of his quills to fly off of his body and go to different locations. Thomas finds one of these quills, which is a small setup for the two characters coming together a little bit later in the movie. However, before we get there, the military, confused as to what to do, call for the aid of a character you may know by the name of Dr. Robotnik, who is played wonderfully here by Jim Carrey. I can't say it enough. Jim Carrey, I think, is the best part of this movie. He is so much fun to watch, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Robotnik arrives on the scene, immediately asserting dominance in a really funny scene. I think it's clear that Jim Carrey had a lot of fun with this movie. He's just chewing up the scenery every time he's on screen, and I think they let him kind of run wild with a lot of his improv here.
Are you in charge here?
Yes, I am.
Wrong. I'm in charge.
Is
Me.
Major
I'm in charge. Allow me to clarify. In a sequentially ranked hierarchy based on level of critical importance, the disparity between us is too vast to quantify. Agent Stone?
The doctor thinks you're basic.
Robotnik has an inkling of an idea that this EMP and the blue quills being found around may be of a creature from another planet, or another dimension in this case. And so he sends out tons and tons of drones to scan the local area in search for Sonic the Hedgehog. And he goes back to his lair, which is a mobile lair inside of this giant cybertech-looking truck. And the inside of this truck, Robotnik's lair itself, was kind of interesting to me because I think it's most comparable to Eggman's lair in Sonic the Hedgehog 06. Which brings me to another point that became very apparent to me really early on, and it was something that I was very much expecting going into this movie. I can't say enough, don't go into this movie expecting a true blue Sonic the Hedgehog film. It is very much grounded in reality. I wouldn't say that you could replace Sonic with any kind of character and it would be the same movie. I do think that there are a lot more ties to it than just that. However, it is not I guess, I don't even know if I'd say fan service heavy movie. There's not a lot of story or character elements from Sonic the Hedgehog other than Sonic, Robotnik, rings, a few other things, references here and there. It is very much Sonic being placed in an action adventure / buddy road trip movie, which I do think it's probably my biggest criticism of the movie. I don't think it makes it bad. I just don't think it makes it quite as much of a Sonic movie as it could have been. But I do understand that line of thinking. If I were a producer or if I were a bigwig in charge of this movie and overseeing its production and trying to make sure that it brings in as wide of an audience as possible, I can very much understand this line of thinking. It was a very safe move by the heads of the production, and it makes sense to me. Obviously, Sonic the Hedgehog is by no means a small franchise, But if you make it too specific to the fans of the series, you kind of alienate people who are otherwise not familiar with him. And so they kind of took their first step into this series as more of a dipping of their toes into the water, so to speak. This would change a little bit more in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but I'll get to that another day. But as this movie stands, it's a perfectly fine movie. I just kind of personally wished that it would have felt more like a Sonic story. But do you remember that ring portal I mentioned earlier? Well, that comes back into play. It turns out Sonic has a big old bag of these rings, and his plan B, if the whole Earth thing doesn't work out, is to travel to the Mushroom Planet, which is a nice little nod to Mushroom Hill Zone from Sonic and Knuckles. However, the downside is Mushroom Planet is barren. The only thing there, as far as company is concerned, is fungi. And Sonic is not very keen on going there, but if he's, about to be caught, it may be his only choice. And so that's where the big conflict of Sonic's story really starts to play in. As I said before, Thomas found one of Sonic's quills, which is a little setup to them meeting later on in the movie. However, there's a little character setup here with Thomas too. His willingness to help Sonic is set up through his protective nature. He's in a role of a protector in this world, and his wife's a veterinarian, and so it immediately sets them up as characters who are going to come to Sonic's aid at one point or another. And Thomas very much does just that. When Robotnik arrives to his house where Sonic has decided to hide out, Thomas covers for him. He lies to Robotnik, says he's not there, and it immediately sets up this kind of tumultuous relationship between the characters. But Robotnik doesn't fall for Thomas's lies for a second, and things escalate really quickly. There is an encounter between Sonic and Robotnik, there's a whole fight scene in the kitchen, part of Thomas and Maddie's house gets destroyed, and it sends Thomas and Sonic on the run, which leads us into our road trip part of the movie. Which, while I did mention earlier, I do wish this would have been more of a Sonic movie overall. I do love a good road trip film, and I found this part of the movie to be one of my favorites. We get a lot of bonding between Sonic and Thomas here, and even though it's a, grown man interacting with a blue cartoon character, I found it worked, and I found it to be, more times than not, pretty endearing. Now, Jim Carrey as Robotnik. It's kind of interesting, because while I did just say that he's probably the best part of the movie for me, personally, it's kind of a double-edged sword. He's really good in it, however, he's not really much like his character in the games at all, at least in this movie. I would say he's probably most comparable to the Boost-era Sonic Eggman, predominantly Sonic Colors, because he's a lot more goofy. He's played mostly for laughs in this movie. But as far as being close to his counterpart in the games, it's not really that one-to-one. But there is a reason for that. This does change in the sequels, as this is more of a Robotnik origin story as much as it is a Sonic origin story, so I can forgive that. Sonic is also a lot more childlike. He's more comedically annoying than in the games, but they do capture his overall playfulness and free spirit. So on Sonic and Tom's road trip, Sonic can't help himself. He gets curious, he goes into a bar, and what happens but Thomas and Sonic getting into a bar fight, where Sonic does have his first chili dog. Once they get back on the road, though, Robotnik is caught up to them, which causes a really entertaining chase scene to ensue, and it ends with Sonic doing a spin dash to take out Robotnik's vehicle, which was pretty awesome to see, I won't lie. Now, at this point, I want to mention the soundtrack of the movie and the overall score. I thought it was fine. I think the score is serviceable. I think it works for the emotions of the movie. The soundtrack is pretty good. They chose a lot of hit songs, a lot of pop songs, which is fine. Again, going back to the point of thinking in a producer's head, I can see why some of these choices were made. However, me personally as a fan, I would have loved to see and hear more Sonic songs in the movie itself. The intro gave me hope, as it had Sonic music there, a little kind of medley thing going on, but that's one of the only uses of Sonic music throughout the entire film, which for a franchise that's so popular for its music, it was pretty disappointing to not really hear any of it at all. But on the topic of music, we do get a Robotnik dance scene that's pretty great, so brownie points there. The destination of Tom and Sonic's long journey is found in Maddie's sister Rachel's home. And Rachel is less than pleased to see them there. First off, she does not like Tom at all. It's made pretty clear they go above and beyond showing us that these two do not have a great relationship. And she's less than pleased to see that a blue alien hedgehog creature has joined him. However, through force, they do end up using this place as refuge, and Rachel's daughter does take a fondness to Sonic, and it's here where she even gives him his iconic running shoes. But another big reason that Sonic and Tom are here is to find a giant bag of rings that Sonic lost. It teleported to the top of a high-rise building, and Sonic, Tom, and Maddie have to scale their way to the top in order to retrieve them. One thing that's displayed really well here is Sonic's speed. There's action sequences where they show off how fast he can go that are really entertaining. And he actually has 2 Quicksilver-esque moments. If you've seen the latter X-Men Fox movies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now again, this is a Robotnik and Sonic origin story, and this is further shown when Sonic coins Dr. Robotnik's nickname, Eggman. However, this time, unlike in the games where he refers to Eggman as his body shape, it's actually here he refers to the drones as being egg-shaped, and so Robotnik must be the Eggman, which I guess progressive of Sonic to not fat-shame Eggman this time? And this all leads us into a really, really cool chase sequence between Sonic and Robotnik, which also features one of my favorite jokes in the movie.
That was an illegal left, by the way.
Through this chase scene, Sonic is using his portal rings. Eggman follows him through each portal, and they travel through various parts of the world, which reminded me very much of Sonic Unleashed, my favorite Sonic game. The chips are down, and it looks like Robotnik's gonna win, but they went back to Green Hills just in time. Tom saves Sonic at the last second, and the townspeople of Green Hills, Montana, all band together to help them. Sonic has a really cool final fight with Dr. Robotnik, which ultimately ends with him sending his ass to Mushroom World. And thus, Sonic's arc ends with him being a potential hero for the future and also finding his new family. And also, Tom has a parallel arc in which he realizes that he does in fact help people in Green Hills, even if it's not in the way that he thought it would be, and he ultimately ends up deciding to stay in town with Maddie. While there is a desperate need for Sonic music throughout this movie, credit where it's due, there is a really nice rendition on the piano of Green Hill Zone towards the end of the movie. As I mentioned before, Tom and Maddie decide to stay in town, and they even keep Sonic with them as a kind of surrogate child. He even gets his own room, very similar to that of Caesar from Planet of the Apes. As for Robotnik, he's trapped in the Mushroom World for the foreseeable future, which, of course, he'll eventually get out in the sequel. On top of that, after the credits, we get a little teaser of Miles Tails per Hour, which is really, really exciting, and teases a much more Sonic-heavy sequel to be coming soon, which we'll talk about soon. But to rewind a little bit, the credits themselves, they're retro-style Genesis Sonic credits, and I found them to be really, really cool. They're accompanied by this song called Speed Me Up, which is kind of the unofficial theme of the movie, I guess you could say. And while I doubt it'll make a Spotify rotation for me personally, I thought it was a pretty good song and a nice energetic way to send the audience off. But the credits themselves were awesome. I mean, it was really, really cool to see the movie play out. They kind of play out the story of the movie in these little credit vignettes in the style of the original Sonic games, which was really, really awesome. But it did make me wish they hadn't have put all their eggs in the very last basket. If they could have sprinkled a little more references, a little more Sonic world building throughout the movie, I do think it would have been stronger. But overall, what we have here is a really solid video game movie, which, if you know the history of those, they're not exactly a dime a dozen. So it's nice that Sonic did get a pretty solid startup movie, and I do personally think, without giving away too much, I think is improved on in the sequel, and will hopefully have a solid continuation in the Sonic trilogy, which is kind of crazy to say. But the movie itself is pretty good. I really liked Sonic. I thought he worked well. They found a way to modernize him without kind of sacrificing his character. He did feel like Sonic at the end of the day. I liked the human characters fine. While I don't think their stories were as interesting as what was going on with Sonic, I felt like it padded the runtime in a solid way and gave the movie a nice flow. Like I said before, Jim Carrey as Robotnik was hilarious. I think he's probably the best part of the movie. Every scene he's in, he just had me dying of laughter, and it's really cool to see Jim Carrey just play a really goofy role where he just gets to eat up every bit that he's in. Overall, I really liked this movie. I don't know why it took me so long to get to it, but I'm glad I did eventually see it, because at the end of the day, I had a really good time with it. And I'm excited to talk about the sequel in the next episode, but that'll be for another day. So thank you guys for watching as always, and until next time, stay tuned.